Back to school season is upon us, and while there are arguably some major perks to the kids being back in school, it is a transition that is not without its challenges. My own kids' school starts pretty early, so they have been back in school already for a little over 2 weeks, and I have had plenty of time to really reflect on what the mental and emotional load is that moms really are carrying through this season. Welcome to Worthy Mother Podcast. I'm your host, Emily Hardy, a mom of two on a mission to help moms everywhere feel less alone. This is not a parenting podcast. Instead, it's a space for pushing back against societal expectations of perfection and embracing self-compassion in your motherhood journey. Let's get into it. So often, the mental and emotional loads that we carry as moms are invisible, meaning that while we are doing it all and keeping track of it all and dealing with the emotional labor that comes with it all, it doesn't actually get acknowledged by society, those around us, and honestly, even ourselves. So this episode is about making that load visible, shining a light on what we all may be carrying as our kids go back to school and we all adjust to the new school year. I am going to end the episode with a conversation about how we can lighten the load, which is super important. But really, the main goal of this episode is just to make it visible in the first place. Before we jump in fully, I would like to ask that if you are loving Worthy Mother Podcast, if you could leave a rating and review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen, and make sure you are subscribed either on your podcast platform or by hitting the subscribe button on YouTube. This not only means so much to me, but it also helps the show find other moms, which of course is a beautiful thing. So as we get into this conversation about what is behind the emotional and mental loads that moms are carrying in the back to school season, I do think it is important to acknowledge why we're talking specifically about the mom's mental and emotional load. Obviously, all of our households are made up of different people. For me, this is the first school year where I am starting as a completely single mom. My ex-husband and I were separated at the beginning of last school year, but we were still living in the same home. It was fairly new. So this is the first year where it's me getting the kids off to school in my home and him getting the kids off to school in his home. And some homes have a mom and a dad, and they may have different responsibilities and roles in getting the kids ready for school, making sure they completed their homework, getting the lunches made, dealing with signing up for soccer, like all these things, right? The different responsibilities we have, the different weight we're all carrying in our relationships and our homes is different. But it's really key to understand that moms tend to be the ones who are expected to carry this load. We are the ones who typically end up dealing with all the little things that may get forgotten otherwise. It really falls on our shoulders. And it's really not acknowledged by society as a whole that that's what's happening, but it is what tends to happen. Again, that's not true necessarily of every family in the same way, but societally, and often then trickling down into what's happening in the home, moms are carrying a bulk of this load, a bulk of this emotional labor. And it's really worth acknowledging that. We are the ones that the school calls first, even if dad is also on the emergency contact list. We are the ones who are expected to sign up for the PTA. We are the ones who are constantly asked, how's the school year going for the kids? How are they doing? It really tends to be that these things fall back on us as the mom. And that is why this load is so heavy. So I just want to get that out of the way. This isn't to say that these things don't impact dads as well. There's obviously a lot of transition that's happening for the entire family, and many dads are probably taking on a lot of this load as well. It throws a wrench in everything, and it's a whole transition to get to used to for them as well. But we're talking about moms specifically and the emotional and mental load that we are carrying during this time. So let's start things off with a big one, and that is the responsibilities, the logistics, the actual tasks that we have to do to make sure our kids are where they're supposed to be, they have what they need, their homework's turned in, all of that. So getting the kids to school on time alone is like a huge load that we have. We cognitively know that it is wildly beneficial for our kids to be in the classroom, in their seat by the time the school bell rings, so that they are ready to go. It's beneficial not only to our kids, but to their teacher, to the other students in the class. Like, believe me, I was an elementary school teacher. I really understand why it's important that our kids are to school on time. That doesn't necessarily mean that my kids are getting their shoes on when I ask, and that we're able to get out the door in any sort of timely fashion, even when we've left excess time in the morning to get ready and like they were ready to go 20 minutes ago. The amount of times that we are scrambling out the door and I'm stressed trying to find parking to be able to get them out and get them to the classroom is like a lot. Again, they've been in school for just over 2 weeks. I only have them 50% of the time, and it's happened probably 3 times this school year already, like out of 5 or 6 days that I've brought them. And on top of them getting to school on time, it's also making sure that their homework's done, making sure that their homework is in their backpack, making sure that their homework got turned in, library books, managing all of that, making their lunches if you make your kid lunch in the morning, and then making sure, of course, that you have the groceries that you need to make the lunch because, there's only certain things that you can pack in the school lunchbox. And it's just a lot. Like, there are so many actual responsibilities that come with sending our kids to school. And if you have the kids home during the summer and you're transitioning back to this, it can kind of slap you in the face like, whoa, this is a lot. And it is a lot. Like, it is a lot of actual responsibility and tasks that we have to perform and, deadlines we have to meet and getting our kids where they need to be on time. It's a lot. There's also just so much on the calendar this time of year with back to school, right? You have back to school night. You maybe have like a meet the teacher before the school year starts where you have to be there at a certain time with your kid, and then back to school night without your kid. It's like these random little events that are happening that are all really important, but also, like, we have our lives, we have our jobs, we have our other kids that we're dealing with. Adding extra little meetings in here and there can be a lot to manage. And we're also getting kids back into sports if your kids are doing any sort of sports. I know my kid just started soccer practice last week, so it happened literally right along with the school year. We started soccer practice after school every Monday. And it's just, again, another thing on our calendars every week. And then also, like, we're heading into the holidays. The holidays aren't too far off, right? Thinking about Halloween and then Thanksgiving and then Christmas. And it's kind of like we're on this downward slope to the holidays that it just feels all of a sudden like things are getting really busy and it's a lot to manage. So we're dealing with those daily responsibilities, but we're also dealing with the addition of extra things on our calendar, extra things taking up our time, all happening at once. And yet the mental and emotional load that comes with back to school is so much more than just those responsibilities. We are also dealing with our kids' own feelings about going back to school. For me, I'm really grateful because this year, both of my kids were in some sort of summer program. My oldest was actually at a program at his current elementary school that was almost as long as the school day, and it went through most of the summer. So he only had like 3 weeks off before going back to school. And the transition back into school wasn't super hard for him emotionally. He didn't have very many big feelings about it because it was such a short gap. And he had a really good time in his summer school experience. So he was like happy to go back and see his friends. And thank goodness my TK kid, who was just starting from the transition from daycare preschool to TK, and it could have been like a really hard transition for him. He also was very excited to go back to school and be at his big brother's school. And he had like a really great first day. So the momentum has kind of been continuing. It's not been perfect, but like it's been pretty good. But in years past, last school year, my kid, who was a first grader at the time, had a really rough time with going back to school. He did not want to go. He was feeling really stressed about having a new teacher and getting used to new routines. And it was stressful. It's like the kind of thing where you know that your kid is going to adjust and be okay, right? Like for me, I knew my kid was going to adjust and be okay in that process. But it's also like you want to validate the feelings. You want to make sure you're there for them in that way. And it's a lot to hold emotionally, a lot to take on where we don't want to dismiss their feelings, but we also don't want to like double down and validate it too much because it's like you're going to be okay, right? Like there's this hard balance to walk, and it's probably different for everyone depending on your kid, because I know for me and my 2 kids, it's different the way I would handle that for each of them. And we have to figure all that out. It's like holding that emotion, maybe feeling quite emotional about it yourself, like hating that they are feeling so upset about going back to school, and also knowing that it's going to be okay. And maybe you have your own questions too. Maybe you have your own sadness around them going to school. And it's like a lot of emotional muck to get through before you can even start dealing with the logistical responsibilities with any sense of regulation and calm. So the kids have their feelings. We have to navigate their feelings. and figure out how to manage our feelings about their feelings. But then we also have our own set of feelings about them going back to school that we get to deal with as well. That is part of the emotional labor that we are doing. So, whether that's missing your kid a little bit when they're gone, or like a deep longing for them to actually just be home with you. Like maybe you don't really want them to go to school. Like you really, really miss them and wish they could be home with you all day. But the reality of your situation is they are going to school. And there can be so much emotion that comes with missing our kids. But then on the other side of that, there's like the relief that can happen when our kids go back to school and maybe not feeling like we deeply miss our kids when they're at school. We're actually really happy that they're at school. And there can absolutely be guilt that can come along when we're actually like excited that our kids are back in school, or we are recognizing what a relief it is that they're going to be in school all day and not at home with us. And like even we can go through like a mix of all of it, right? Like we feel guilty that they're going back to school and we miss them, but also like we're really stoked they're going back to school. And it's like an ever-changing thing that we're trying to manage and wrap our brains around what all those feelings mean about us as a mom, which newsflash, they don't really mean anything about you as a mom. Like there's a lot of factors into why you may be feeling any of these feelings, but oftentimes we're trying to make it mean something about us. And it just complicates everything. It adds to that load. There's the emotional load of like having the emotions, but there's also the load we're taking on trying to figure out what it means about us through the process. And then there's like a lot that can piggyback on that. We may have concerns for our kids' safety when they're at school, whether that is their emotional safety, feeling like we want to be there with them when they're navigating friendships and dealing with different adults in their lives. And, you know, just like the concern of a mother to protect her child in all the situations, even if we know we're okay letting go of that, there's almost like this rooted concern for our kids, like always worrying, always wanting to make sure that they're okay. And then the reality is that there's also concerns for our children's safety. And I don't want to get into this too much because this isn't the focus of this episode, and there's a lot to say about physical safety in schools, particularly surrounding gun violence. Again, don't want to get into it too much, but I just want to acknowledge like what a load it is to carry the reality of our world when we send our kids to school every day. Like it's crushing. And we just do it and get on with it. And it's a lot. It's reasonable that we are concerned, that there's some fear somewhere in us about our kids' safety when we send them to school. And yet we do it and we move on. There's value in making that visible. And then another factor that contributes to this emotional and mental load when we're sending our kids back to school is really how our children show up to school, how they show up in the classroom, their behavior, their relationship with their teacher, their relationship with their peers. I actually did an episode around this time last year about equating our children's behavior to our sense of worth as a mother, and how easily we can take information about our child and how they are struggling in the classroom with academics, or they are having a hard time with their peers, or their teacher is struggling to get them to sit still in class while they're teaching a lesson, and how those messages we receive about our kids can often infiltrate how we feel about ourselves as mothers. And the reality is that when we send our kids to school, like they're not perfect, they will not be perfect. They may be close enough to it. They may be doing well in the sense of like fitting into the parameters that they are, quote, supposed to be in school, where you're not hearing about any of those more negative little things from the school teacher, from the principal. But the reality is that a lot of us have received calls from teachers. A lot of us have had hard meetings with teachers about how our kid is doing academically or what they're struggling with socially. And it is this immense pressure when we feel like it says something about who I am as a mom that my kid is having a hard time in this area. So that emotional load of just like feeling those things and trying to navigate that is really tough. But then we also have to like navigate the actual dealing with things. If there's consequences that need to be addressed, if there are plans that need to be put in place to make sure that your kid is getting extra academic support at home, or if they are maybe eligible to start the process to receive an IEP to get additional support in school, and you have to be somebody advocating for them in that way. Like there's so much that happens when we are working in partnership with our kids' school on our child as a whole person. And it can be a lot emotionally and mentally and like physically too in executing these tasks to really make sure that we are working together with the school. And it's a lot of pressure. It is a lot of pressure. So I actually will go ahead and link that episode about how we sometimes do equate our sense of worth and our child's behavior together, especially like in the school setting. I will link that in the show notes because I think it can be a really helpful one if this strikes a chord with you of like, yep, that's the emotional load I'm dealing with. Like, that's it. I have been there. I understand it. And I also think it's worth, again, like exposing, shining a light on and saying, wait, I don't have to make this mean something about me. What do I actually believe here? Because again, we have to navigate all the other stuff too. We have to navigate the dealing with it. We have to navigate like communicating and advocating for our child. So if we can at least release some of the emotions behind it and a lot of that like value stuff of like, this is about me and my worth, then it can at least like release some of the load. And then just kind of coming back around, like everything falls on the mom. We think about the PTA. I remember seeing a list of the PTA like board members or the people who are like present at PTA meetings when my kid was in kindergarten, and every single one of the names, maybe there was one that appeared to be a man's name. Every single one appeared to be a mother's name to me. Like, that's my perception of that list. It was all women carrying the load. And that is something that has stuck with me. It is something that I don't yet know what to do with that information. Like, I don't know what the action step is in fixing that, but I think it's a good representation of just what kind of load moms are expected to carry with our kids in school. It really does tend to fall on the moms. But again, sometimes it's not even about the solving the problem. It's just about the exposing what's happening in the first place. And so this is the light that we're shining on this. There may be things in here that resonate deeply with you. There may be things that you're like, that's not something that is so much of an issue. But I just want to acknowledge, like, we are carrying a lot during this season. We're carrying things that are different than other seasons of life, other seasons of literally the year. It's a lot. Going back to school this season is a whole lot. So what can we do about it? I said at the beginning, I would share some ways that we can work to lighten these loads. Again, this is something that is multi-layered. This is like a societal issue, and then, talking about home dynamics, family dynamics, and then like what's going on internally within us. And so it's not just something that we can expect will be fixed, that there's not going to be a disproportionate load on moms, or that any of this is just going to go away, because like there are actual responsibilities and there's like more we have to deal with when our kids are in school, getting them out the door, right? Like, it's not making it go away. But there are things we can do to lighten the load somewhat. So I'm going to share some of these. Take what you think will help you. Leave the rest if it doesn't resonate, if it doesn't sound applicable to anything you're dealing with, then leave it. It's not for you. All good. So the first thing that I have for you is to recognize what actually matters. This is such a big one, and I think it kind of underlies everything else that I'm going to share. We have to let go of the perfectionism that we carry into all of this. So many of us do anyway. Like, I know getting my kids to school on time, there's an element of I know that it's what's best for them, but there's also an element of like deep anxiety of being late to something that I carry with me from like my upbringing. And I know that I don't want to pass it on to my kids. I also know that like I probably very much am passing it on to my kids, but the work that I can do to mitigate that and try not to stress and have outbursts as much when we are running late. Because if we're running late, my reaction to it doesn't actually change what's happening. But that's my anxiety coming up, right? And there's a lot of these things where we can like stop and say what actually matters here. Thinking about like our kids and how they're performing in school. Is it the most important thing for me that my kid is getting all A's, or that they are doing remarkably well sitting in class and listening? Like, is that something that I am going to attach their worth to and my worth to, right? So just sitting down with anything that you're struggling with in the back to school season and looking at like, what here is something that matters to me? And it could be that like something you're struggling with really does matter to you, but it could also be that there's layers there of like what your actual values are don't line up with how it's kind of coming up in your life. Another piece of advice, and this is a piece of advice at all times, but especially right now when there are so many volunteer lists going out and activities for your kids to sign up for and all the things, is to say no to the excess. Again, you have to know what's important to you to be able to do this effectively, but you don't need to be adding everything onto your plate. Even if it feels like that's what it means to be a good mom, like it's not. You don't need to say yes to everything. It is okay to say no to things, and it is okay to say no to most things. You are carrying a lot. You do not need to say yes to carrying more all the time. I also encourage you to ask for support where you can. I just did an episode on what the village looks like in modern motherhood a couple weeks ago, and I talked about like asking for support, getting help, receiving help, and I will always come back to it when it comes to lightening our emotional and mental load. We can't be the one expected to do it all. We can't expect ourselves to do it all. And sometimes we have to ask for help. We have to accept and receive help. And then just a last little nugget that I'm going to leave here is kind of a bigger conversation, and it would have more to do with your individual home, but that is reevaluating who is carrying the mental and emotional load in your home. And I will point you to an episode of the podcast where we did get into this. The episode is from May 2025, so just a few months ago. It's called Supermom Myth, The True Cost of the Mental Load, with the guest, Stacey McCann. She did an incredible job starting to explain how you can maybe address some of these conversations with your partner about the mental and emotional load that you're carrying. I'm not going to get too into it right now because, again, all of our situations are very different, and this may or may not be like the factor that you can tackle right now or that you need to tackle right now. But if it's something that you would like more resources on, definitely check out that episode. I will have that linked in the show notes as well. There is a lot that we each are carrying at all times, but right now, there's those unique challenges that we might be feeling the weight of. And I just want to acknowledge you. I want to acknowledge what you're doing. I want to acknowledge the mental labor and the emotional labor that you are participating in getting your kids to school every day on time and to managing everything that comes along with that. Like there's a lot that we're managing, a lot that we're holding, and it's worth making it visible. It's worth acknowledging it. It's worth saying, you know what, you're doing a good job. And like even on the days where you're struggling and like maybe not doing such a great job in terms of like living up to how you would like to be showing up in motherhood, like you're doing a lot. So I'm going to give you a pat on the back. I'm going to give myself a pat on the back. We're making it through the back to school season. We've got this. And if we're struggling, yeah, I feel ya. Thank you so much for tuning in to this episode of Worthy Mother Podcast. We will be back next week with another awesome guest episode. Until then, you are worthy, mama.